Is the United Kingdom ready for Rishi Sunak? That's our special focus on the broadcast this evening. I'm Barkadat, you're with the Mojo Story, and we're doing a deep dive into the fascinating election that is unfolding in the United Kingdom, where Rishi Sunak is now one of four contenders to be possibly the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It is reported in the British press that Boris Johnson sees him as a traitor, but that isn't really counting for much among those who have to decide who will be the next leader of the Tories. Now, Mr. Sunak, of course, has an Indian connection. Apart from being of Indian origin, he is married to the daughter of Infosys founder Narayana Murthy. His election has generated huge debate within India, with some Indians rushing to claim Sunak as our own, and others saying the diversity that we see on display in these elections in the United Kingdom has great lessons for us in India, who might well display more xenophobia than we're seeing, at least thus far, in the United Kingdom. So, are we really talking about a Desi at Downing Street, or are we forcibly claiming Mr. Sunak as our own? And what's the view from London? Let's introduce our guests on the program today. Joining us first up is Nick Nugent. He's a former editor with the BBC and a veteran journalist. Welcome to the program. Also joining us from London today is Pranav Bhanot. He's a lawyer and a councillor. Welcome to the program. Also joining us is Kishwar Desai. She's joining us from London, and she's the author of multiple books, most recently being one called The Longest Kiss. Joining us is veteran diplomat and author, Ambassador Navtej Sarna, who's of course served in many positions, including as High Commissioner of India to the UK, and finally, diplomatic and strategic affairs editor at The Hindu, Suhasini Haidar, is with us. Welcome, everybody. Let me start with you, Nick, if I may. What's it looking like? Is it going to be Sunak, or is it too early to say before we get into what it might actually represent to us here in India or to you there in the UK?
I think it's too early to say, to be honest. It's looking very promising if you're a backer of Rishi Sunak, as a lot of people seem to be. But it will be clearer by tomorrow, but not by any means signed and settled, because we have two more rounds of MPs voting. That's Conservative MPs voting. One is this afternoon, later today, and the other is tomorrow. And then the top two candidates, that will go out to membership of the Tory party across the country, roughly 200,000 people. And they'll take their time to vote. So we won't know for sure until early September. But it does look like he is in a very promising position. He's topped the poll in every round so far, and he's just on the verge of being a cert for the final two-person competition. So looking very likely, but I wouldn't put money on it, because in previous Conservative Party elections, things have gone, as you might call it, wrong at the final stage, and the favourite hasn't prevailed. So anything could happen.
Well, that's a safe bet always. I think we learned that the hard way in journalism, that things can change at the last moment. Nick, let me ask you this before I open it up for everybody else. In India, there's a section saying, hey, he's British, why are we so invested? And there's another section that's, of course, sort of looking at this man who took his oath on the Bhagavad Gita, who's always sort of claimed his sort of Hindu identity in a predominantly Christian country, and is saying, no, there is something to be said about this moment. How is he viewed there? Is there much made of his Indian origins? I'm not talking right now about his marriage. We'll come to that later, but more so of his own origins.
Well, I would say not much, really. He, after all, was born in Britain. He was educated in Britain, and he has held high office as Chancellor of the Exchequer, Minister of Finance, and is regarded as a true Brit. But of course, I mean, it's been a very interesting race, this Conservative leadership, because four of the candidates were of what you might call non-British origin, but all have good credentials to be regarded as Brits. I think I'm right in saying that all of the 8 original, or maybe it was 10 original candidates, were British born. 4 of them were of non-British origin, but all of them were either educated or at least partly educated in Britain. So it's not a big factor. I mean, you may look back on this election and say that it was colorblind, because there's quite a likelihood that if Rishi succeeds, or that there's a lady of Nigerian origin who's still in the race, that's Kemi Badenoch. So it could go any way, but certainly it's a curiosity, I would say, that several of the candidates so far have been of non-British origin, but we're not making a big thing of it, because the real test is that Rishi Sunak has done a very responsible job for 2 years, and that's what his party members are voting for, whether they regarded him as a success as Minister of Finance or not.
Yeah. So you're almost saying that his ethnicity, and to that extent, his origin or the origin of his family is not the point. And let me bring in Pranav at this point. As someone who's also in public life, do you believe that race, ethnicity, color is now a non-issue in the United Kingdom?
I think I would agree with that, and I do agree with Nick's comments. When we're looking at who the next leader is going to be, I think the political landscape is very important. Who's going to be the best if there was a general election against a Labour? Also, who's the most competent? I think the idea that Rishi Sunak is from the Indian diaspora is a bonus. It's probably a cherry on the cake for people who are from the Indian diaspora, like myself. We can understand his story, the fact that his grandma came with nothing and he's worked hard to get to where he is. But I do agree with Nick. Actually, fundamentally, the person who should be getting the role as Prime Minister needs to be the right person, the competent person, the person with integrity. What their background is should probably be second to all of that.
And so you're saying that even in the, let's say, South Asian community or in the British Indian community, there's no great excitement about the fact that Mr. Sunak can trace his origins back to India, Pranav?
No, I think there's an excitement among the Indian diaspora that actually, for the first time, this could be somebody who is the champion of the Indian diaspora dream. So I think within the diaspora, within the community, I think there is a real excitement. There could be a British Indian walking into number 10. It's never happened before. But I think when we're looking at the wider Conservative membership, those that will be voting over the summer, I do not believe that excitement is quite the same.
Very interesting. So our two friends from Britain, sort of the Britishers on this panel, the Brits on this panel, as Nick would say, don't see much in this Desi connection. But Navtej, ironies are hard to miss when it comes to those of us who have been colonized nations in the past, right? And as someone like yourself, who just has a book out on the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and has served as High Commissioner of India to the United Kingdom, I'm sure you're spotting some of these ironies if Mr. Sunak actually goes all the way through to becoming Prime Minister. How do you see this moment, Navtej?
Thank you, Barka. I think it has many aspects. Firstly, as the other speakers have said, the first speaker, Nick, has said that it's not yet done and dusted. So I think a lot of this will play out when it goes to the wider vote. And that is in a way, if you see it, people are saying he's got 115 votes in the MPs, but what happens when he goes to the wider sort of electorate, and that is where race, ethnicity, color may come in. It's an open question. I somehow tend to disagree. I mean, if he does make it, I think it's more to the testimony of the diversity in the top echelons of Britain that has, in the United Kingdom, that has today become acceptable. There is a sense, of course, if he does make it, there will be a sense of the diaspora story being vindicated. It's the typical, outside boy making good, right or wrong. He's not really outside. And of course, all of us will make a song and dance about the empire striking back. We can have our emotional moment, but I would say we shouldn't get carried away. We get carried away. I mean, we got carried away with Kamala Harris. When is the last time you heard of Kamala Harris? So I think even if he does make it, India as a nation, we as a people should be very careful not to claim him as our boy and sort of load him with extra expectations. because if he does make it, he is going to play fully the role of a conservative British Prime Minister. And that is only fair. That's what he will be, and that's what he should be allowed to do. So we can have our, mithai over it for a while and then forget about it.
Well, that's quite cynical and hard-nosed, and I would say accurate. But Kishwar, here's a scenario. What if he doesn't make it? And I think Ambassador Sarna paints a realistic picture that in the end, this is going to be the base of the Tories that is going to have the final say in who their leader is going to be. And then you might hear some people say, "Oh, this was racism. This was his being brown went against him, and so on." Perched in London and really Kishwar occupying two worlds of India and Britain. How do you see this?
Barkha, there is a lot in what Navtej and others have said, but let us also look at it from Rishi's perspective. It's the way he is playing it, and I think that is very important for us to take note of. He's not playing it as an Indian. He's not playing it as a Desi. He only talks about his education and, of course, the struggle that his family had, the early difficulties they had to go through. But he's also been educated here. He's been to Oxford. He has many friends in the Conservative Party and indeed outside of it as well. So we have to remember that it's not just him appearing on the scene suddenly as an Indian. He is a very, very well-integrated person into the social network out here, into the Conservative Party. And let us also admit, he has worked very hard. We might say that it's wonderful, one of our boys has made it. But in order to break that, in order to break into it, we must remember he went to Yorkshire, which is a very difficult constituency. It's almost completely a white constituency. He went there. He took it on, and I was reading today how he used to work so hard that the former representative of it was saying that even if he had to get up at 6 in the morning and go and milk cows, he would do that, because he wanted to show it's a very farming oriented constituency and they love him there. So it's not just that Rishi appeared and just suddenly, was brought into the treasury and then we are also impressed. He has been working on this for a long time. I wouldn't be surprised that even when he started his career, he had his eye on the top job. And why not? Why would anybody enter politics if they did not want the top job? And he has aspired for it. He has worked hard for it. Nothing in him is about being an Indian and holding the Indian story up. It's all very nice for us to be happy, and I'm happy. I mean, we all know the family. It's a wonderful family, and I think they've all worked, including his father-in-law, his own father, everybody. They're all representative of the hardworking Indian. But at the same time, what Rishi has done very largely is what Rishi has done. And it is not thanks to any one of us or thanks to the Indian diaspora and all our drum beating and so on will not make him come out and say anything about India till he has won the election. That is the point in which maybe he might say something. And I think he's going to win the way he is going, even though I'm very impressed with the diversity. This is the Conservative Party, Barkha. I mean, how amazing is it for us to see people of all colors and from different countries coming together? It's a different Britain. It's a Britain that is completely changed. So yes, I'm getting these constant messages. Oh, tomorrow, maybe an Indian can become the king or the queen of England. There are all those things and said, we can now strike back at the empire which is going on. I think this is not that story. This is not that story.
Even if you're watching too much of Bridgerton and you're reimagining,
yes,
thanks to Shonda Rhimes, who's American, you're thinking anything can happen. But Suhasini, there's a more serious question here. And that question is that, a section of our country, men and women, who are rushing to claim Sunak as our own, and we've heard the reality check from our panelists, would not necessarily be quite as generous if there was somebody from another country, originating from another country, if they aspired to the top job. Are there lessons for us as Indians here in this moment?
Well, Barkha, I think we'd be comparing apples and oranges, because obviously the reference that you are making is to someone like Sonia Gandhi not being acceptable as a prime minister in India. But India does not have that kind of immigration strength that all of these countries do. And I think it is impossible to compare that kind of thing. It is impossible to say, what will it mean when the child of an immigrant in India becomes the Prime Minister of India. I think India has many great milestones it has achieved in terms of pluralism. We've had minority members who have become prime ministers, vice presidents, and presidents in this country. I don't think we need to prove in the same way that maybe some other countries do. I do want to jump into this and ask the basic question that while we are all discussing what a great moment it might be for Indians, what about Kenyans? Why aren't we asking about Rishi Sunak's actual grandparental past, which actually came from Kenya? I think the answer to that is very simple. We always look for something in common with somebody. And Rishi Sunak is not just of originally Indian origin. He acknowledges cultural roots. He's married to an Indian as well. I think all of that makes a difference. And if he does make it to the top, it's a great day for the UK. They get a non-majoritarian, non-white leader of the Conservative Party and the Prime Minister. But I'm not sure it makes all that much difference to India. Navtej put it very well. We've seen leaders in other countries. In fact, I think in 2020, the group in diaspora actually put together a list and found 200 leaders around the world of Indian origin in various echelons of political echelons of various countries, including, I think, 5 were heads of government, and 5 were vice presidents or vice prime ministers. So there's a lot of them to cheer for. There's a lot of them to be happy about, but we're happy for them in the country of their choice. I'm not sure when it comes to bilateral relations, it makes a difference. In fact, I would say the opposite in a lot of cases, where leaders who are of Indian origin tend to have higher expectations from the government here than if they had no exposure to India at all. I take the case of Kamala Harris, for example, or Ro Khanna, or Pramila Jayapal, or Ami Bera, in the US. The loudest voices on the concerns of human rights in India have often come from people of Indian origin, and I can find you equivalents in other countries as well. So I think all those cheering must remember that while it is a great day for somebody who may be related to us, or we can find something in common with, it's a bigger day for them and for the country that they have chosen than it is for us.
And I think you make a great point that that my question is not necessarily framed accurately, because we are not that sort of global destination for migration in the way that London or the United States of America may well be. But Pranav, why don't you share your own story? How difficult has it been for somebody like you to break into politics as a person of color, as a person?
I think I share many of the challenges that Rishi Sunak has experienced. My grandparents came with very little money. They worked hard. They valued education. When I first became a member of the Conservative Party many years ago, there were not many people of my colour there. In fact, I remember one instance where I was asked to come and sit at the front just to ensure that there was a diverse front row at the conference. How far have we come? It's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's testament to the Conservative Party and the leadership in championing people of different backgrounds. I think it's always a challenge. I think racism comes in all sorts of different ways. It's hidden in many instances. But I think Rishi Sunak's done very well in seeing past that. Up in his constituency, which is predominantly white, he's worked incredibly hard. And we've heard earlier about him waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to try and understand the locals and the way they work. So I think it's challenging, and it has been a challenge to break into politics, but it's getting much easier. And people like Rishi Sunak has opened the doors. They've smashed glass ceilings. Even if he doesn't become the Prime Minister, I believe he's smashed glass ceilings to open the pathway for other people of immigrant background to take the top jobs.
And Nick, if I can bring you in, let's finally look at one of the controversies that has dogged Sunak, and it actually has to do with his Indian wife and her tax controversy. It finally ended with her saying that she would voluntarily pay taxes that she didn't think she was legally obliged to pay given her non-domicile status. Is this going to be an issue? Is this an issue with the base given the sort of cost of living inflation numbers in the United Kingdom today?
Well, I don't think so. I think that moment has passed. Certainly his high standing in popular opinion took a knock when that information came out, plus the fact that he was a green card holder, suggesting he might plan to migrate to the United States. But I think that moment is past, and I think we are now seeing him, I like to think we are judging him on merit, and merit here means for his performance as Minister of Finance for the last 2 years. I mean, interestingly, tax policy is very much at the heart of the campaign, with all candidates except Rishi Sunak calling for tax reductions, and Rishi apparently taking a rather sensible view that the moment is not quite right to cut taxes. After all, he has been running the show for 2 years, and that's why I say I think they are judging him on his merit, the fact that he has seemed to be a rather sensible Minister of Finance. Indeed, he became popular during the pandemic because of introducing some incentives, eat out to help out, whatever it was called, encouraging us to eat out to get restaurants back in business. And that's the sort of thing that I think his fellow MPs are judging him by, the fact that he appears to be a sensible steward of the nation's finances, if you like to see it like that. So interestingly, all other candidates are calling for tax cuts. They think that's the popular appeal. He's not calling for tax cuts quite yet, only when we're ready, he says. And I think that will possibly be what he's judged by.
Interesting. And Kishwar, of course, Nicholas is being sort of complimentary, as is Pranav, who's a member of the Conservative Party, but there is an equal amount of vitriol that was, in fact, delivered at Rishi Sunak's door when this controversy first erupted. It compelled Ms. Murthy to actually go on Twitter and make a statement of her own, talking about how she was as proud of her country as Rishi Sunak was of his. How do you see this controversy around his Indian wife, who happens to be the daughter of Infosys founder Narayana Murthy?
Firstly, Barkha, let's just put this on the table that after all, Rishi was then in charge of the Treasury. And I'm sure he had taken very good advice, probably the best that you can get in the country. And he must have realized that whatever he's doing is legal. Otherwise, he would not have done it. I have full confidence in that. So I am, firstly, we were all very taken aback when this controversy broke forth. And of course, there's a reason to it. There is a cost of living crisis here, and anybody who is wealthy at present is automatically a target of a large amount of vitriol, especially when they're running for election, and it looks like that they don't even know. Like Rishi wore a shoe, I forget which one it was, Prada or Gucci or something, yesterday, and then lo and behold, you have it in all the newspapers.
Yeah, there was 500. It was 500 pounds. Even I remember.
I don't know. None of us have any idea, but does it matter? And I think what he said is what we should really look at, because he said, look, I look at the guy, I don't look at his bank balance when I judge someone. So I think if you look at how his performance has been thus far, and therefore I would say that present day voters are going to be more swayed by that than what happened in the past, because let's face it, there's been enough controversy about the Conservatives to fill up many, many, many books. And I think when Boris ultimately settles down and writes his big memoir, there's going to be a lot more. But hey, if you are going to be in politics, as I say, don't step into the kitchen kitchen if you can't face the heat. So there's going to be lots of things which are going to be said about many of the contenders who are right now in the fray as well. And so Rishi has faced up to it very well. And therefore, I do believe that he took the right stance. Akshata immediately did pay the taxes because, you don't want to just unnecessarily create a controversy when there's no need for one. And let me just say it again, I'm sure he took good advice, and I'm sure what he did was legal.
And of course, in the televised debates, he's made a passionate defense of his in-laws, whom he says, self-created their wealth through hard work. But Navtej, I want to come to this very interesting point raised by Suhasini of what happens when you're dealing as an Indian with public figures in other countries who have an Indian link, but actually belong to that country. And she actually argues that they look towards India, with a greater expectation. The reverse also happens. When Kamala Harris became vice president, we sort of all looked to her as if she was going to do something different from Joe Biden. That doesn't quite happen, does it, in your experience? Sorry, you're on mute? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a very important point. As having been at one end of it, I think yes, we load up too much expectation on a foreign leader who has the vaguest Indian connection, and I think that's really setting ourselves up for disappointment, because if that other person, and we have to get over this. We have to with a country which has so many immigrants now. We have to stop expecting each one of them to continue to behave. They have spent decades there, proving that they are loyal to another flag, to another system, to working hard to rise up in that system. And yes, they might turn up at a rally and they might, do Diwali at home and all that. That's all fine. That's cultural heritage.
But who do they back in the India versus England cricket? I actually met somebody in London recently who actually said that he's of Indian origin, he's British, but he backs India. So there's all kinds of multiple hyphenated identities that people do carry with them.
Absolutely. So, and this is something which we have still not come to terms with. Ourselves, and we wouldn't like to have other countries interfere in our election and etc. But by the same token, we should be very careful that this is an election in the United Kingdom, and they have their own issues. And just because a person happens to have an Indian connection or an Indian father-in-law, he does not become son-in-law of India.
That's well said. But Suhasini, is there also a changing nature of Indian politics, which in recent years has become much more engaged with the diaspora than we have known before? So, for example, you have entire non-voting constituencies being addressed, especially by the Modi government. There is a definitive shift there. And has that made us much more involved in who's going to, be vice president in the US and who's going to be PM in the UK?
Firstly, Barkha, a lot of this is about feeling, and you're quite right. The rhetoric has certainly been built that a new India now owns its diaspora in a way the old India did not. I'm not sure it's borne out with facts, because when you look at elections, for example, the previous elections in the US or in Canada or in other parts of the world, there's no real link that shows you that Indian Americans now voted for the candidate that is seen as closer to the government in New Delhi. We've seen this again and again, even though Trump did the Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar or Boris ko abhi jitana hai kind of thing. There's no real evidence that Indian Americans worked on the basis of their Indian origin to vote for any of these leaders. The second point that I do want to stress again is this idea. It's not just about the expectations one has from these leaders, because the truth is, in the past, I think Pandit Nehru was once asked about it, and he said, "Let them be free. They have chosen a different country. Let them be free to make their lives in there." And by loading these expectations, we unfortunately are only going to, as Indians, be disappointed. Unless you're going to tell me that an Indian Prime Minister in the UK and is going to return the Kohinoor or apologize for Jallianwala Bagh or make reparations for colonial depredations, I don't really think that you can make the case that having an Indian prime minister, Indian origin prime minister in any of these countries changes anything more than the basic bonhomie between two countries and a little bit of ownership, perhaps. But I think it is actually counterproductive. What we do in terms of making somebody of Indian origin who's a citizen of another country, has chosen that country, to have anything more than just a cultural bond. You know, Boris Johnson had a link to, I think one of his sister-in-laws was Indian. He's had, you know, links to India as well. In fact, he's traveled here a lot. There are other leaders who have other links with India, not necessarily of birth. And I think it's okay to celebrate those and say, great, we hope that you do better things for India. But I really do think that it has been counterproductive in the last year, because it's raised the expectations that this diaspora is now basically little India living in in other countries, which is going to change things for us politically.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you raise the Kohinoor or the Jallianwala Bagh, and it makes me wonder, and I want to take this to you, Kishwar, first, whether there is a special engagement with this issue because this is the United Kingdom, and there is that imagined empire striking back moment, as Navtej said. There is a huge debate, an ongoing live debate about reparations that Britain owes India. There is a huge debate. Navtej's book, your own work on the Partition Museum in Amritsar, you've all dealt with the scars of those years of the colonization. And therefore, is there something different here that makes us more invested in who leads the UK? And is that even sensible anymore? Kishwar.
Well, I certainly believe that you have a point there, Barkha. I mean, whether we admit it or not, I would like to be very logical, like Navtej is being, and saying that, you know, it will not make one iota of a difference. But certainly within me, and I do believe it may happen. And actually, it is already happening, because I do know of instances where before Rishi came into the picture, reparations of a small kind are already happening, are already taking place between museums in the UK and India. I mean, these are very significant small steps which are moving towards a certain direction. Whether they will, apologize for Jallianwala Bagh, I don't know. But I do know that it is going to create a new sensitivity and a sensibility towards what India wants, what kind of respect it wants, what kind of recognition it requires for the scars of the past. And I am sure that will happen, because whether it is Rishi heading it or it is going to be other people around him who are invested in the whole image of, here is a person of Indian origin who is heading the country, and surely there must be many linkages which they then want to explore. So yes, I think that behind the scenes already there would be movements of not seismic nature, but certainly small movements towards it, which are already taking place, and these will be built upon when Rishi is there. As I said, regardless of whether he heads it or not, it does change the attitude towards the country where his family originally came from. That is a given. So I can expect that there will be some moments which may be actually quite big. And I know of some things which are taking place, which I unfortunately can't say, but I do know that these will then get bigger momentum, in the coming years.
Navtej, do you agree? I mean, we were just talking when we were talking about your book that there hasn't actually been a formal apology for Jallianwala Bagh. Now you have someone with links to India, and immediately, as Suhasini said, you load up your expectations and say, oh, on Mr. Sunak's watch, this will happen. Is that sort of designed for disappointment in a way?
Yes, absolutely. I think I wouldn't envy Mr. Sunak being in Mr. Sunak's shoes, or when this question would be raised, because he can do pretty much little on it on his own. I think I agree with Kishwar to the point that the world has changed on a broader scale. Forget who is the Prime Minister of the UK in the next month. There is a wider movement for sort of reversing some of the wrongs of the past. there is a bigger realization in terms of Akshadat and museums, and there is a bigger question on reparations, whether it is in the Caribbean or it is in other countries. So as part of that larger move of a changing world, we may see something. We may see some of the statues removed, for instance, etc. But I wouldn't say that it would happen simply because we had a Desi at Downing Street.
Yeah. Let me bring in Pranav and Nick now. Nick, what's the one surprise development that you think could still take place that could upend the expectation that Rishi Sunak is the front runner? Hang on, you're on mute. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
We shouldn't take it for granted. By tomorrow, there will be 2 candidates left, and I expect that Rishi Sunak will be one of them. But just imagine the situation that the candidates who fall today and tomorrow, if all their votes were transferred to the rival of the final 2, then Rishi wouldn't get the job. I mean, it's as blunt as that. It's a curious election by elimination, day by day by elimination. But we get to our final 2 tomorrow. So I'm certainly not regarding it as in the bag. I'm reasonably confident that Rishi will be one of the 2. And it then goes out to the Conservative Party membership across the country. And they might have different ways of judging, different criteria. Let's be blunt. Until now, members of parliament are voting for the leader that they think will win the next election. In other words, will get them back into parliament. It's as blunt as that. When it goes out to the party, yes, that's still a factor, winning the next election, but there's a sort of more popular appeal, and they might decide that it's time for example, another woman to take the helm. That could be the scenario. So please don't regard it as signed, sealed and settled. I would be fairly confident that Rishi's going into the final round, but I won't take it beyond that. Can I just add to what's been said already? I mean, did you get as excited about this when a person of Indian origin became Prime Minister of Portugal, person of Goan origin, and likewise of Ireland? We had a Goan in charge. So it's not even a novelty within Europe, quite apart from places like Mauritius and Fiji. It's not even a novelty within Europe of having an Indian leader.
And that's the point I make, that is it the unique, complex history, our sense of having been colonized? There's something here, Navtej, that makes it different. It's a great question from Nick, that we don't even probably know or remember Portugal or Ireland, or countries in the Caribbean.
Yes,
well, I think respond to that by saying, have we in Britain matured enough that we are colorblind and we don't really make a big issue of it? And I like to think that is the case. I'm sorry, it wasn't my turn to speak.
Sorry.
No, I absolutely. I think despite all the cynicism that I've expressed so far, I think it is a Lagan moment. We do take a special joy when we sort of do something in the United Kingdom, and that, I'm afraid, is a reality of our history. So whether it's cricket or whether it's something that the UK is different in terms of the emotional connect, and that's part of the emotional connect.
Yes, fair enough. Pranav, I'm going to give you the last word. What's your bet? Who's going to be the next leader of your party?
Well, it's very difficult to say because when it goes out to the membership is a very broad church. And when it is voter in the ballot box, where no one else can see where the cross is going to go, it's very hard to predict. I think Rishi is certainly in the best position at the moment, could change very quickly. And I think that given that British Indians have taken the 2 key positions of office, so the Home Secretary and Treasurer, I think we're in the best chance possible for an Indian Prime Minister. And having looked at the various candidates in the past and in the future, I think this is probably the best opportunity in a very long time that there will be somebody of Indian origin going in, but we simply can't tell. So I think Rishi for the moment is my preferred candidate, but it can change. Politics, 1 week is a long time in politics.
Fair enough. And I think for all the health warnings that we've got from all of our panelists, I think as Navtej said, there is a unique history here that cannot be overlooked. And even if it's not and shouldn't be a cultural moment for India, it's certainly going to be, if he does make it, a big cultural moment within the United Kingdom, to Nick's point about the maturing of a country emerging from its own very, very contentious history. So leaving it there, thank you very much, Kishwar, Suhasini, Navtej, Nick, and Pranav. And we should know more tomorrow and hope to see all of you again as this election unfolds. Thank you very much. Have a great day. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.